Chapter 51. Bang. A wave of wild and violent Do Chi ripples surged over. The entire hall was instantly swept by a wave of powerful Do Chi storm. The fog scattered in all directions. Everything within the hall was completely revealed. In this manner, it caused the entire hall to appear incomparably empty. The expression of the old flame demon ghost suddenly changed the moment the storm swept over. His feet took a couple of steps back before he managed to dodge it. After the storm scattered, the old flame demon ghost bitterly turned his head around and looked at the interior of the hall. The old flame demon ghost focused his gaze and looked over. A human figure wrapped in a black robe was standing in the middle of the hall. 3 light clusters were suspended in the air a couple of dozen feet above the head of the black-robed human figure. Only at this moment did the old flame demon ghost truly see the structure of the entire hall. The entire main hall was built with warm white jade. Even the utensils in the main hall were ordinary. The entire hall appeared to be white. However, at this moment, the entire hall was filled with white light. However, at this moment, the old flame demon ghost and the black-robed human figure in the hall appeared out of place in this bright and clean color. There was also the pitch-black chain that bound the 3 balls of light. The dark black chain was exactly the same as the chain in the hands of the few black-robed people from before. However, it appeared to be 1 size larger when compared to the latter in terms of size. The end of the chain reached the highest point of the hall. There was a white jade pillar that was shaped like an awl at that spot. The dark black chain was wrapped around it and locked into it. The symbols that were carved on the chain were emitting waves of light at this moment. At the same time that the light was flashing, a cream-white airflow slowly flashed over the chain and extended to the end of the chain. The eyes of the human figure under the black robe focused on the old flame demon ghost. His expression was ice-cold, causing the old flame demon ghost to instantly feel a chill all over his body. The old flame demon ghost hurriedly bowed to the black-robed human figure and spoke in a humble tone. This subordinate, the old flame demon, greets Hall Chief. The black-robed person emitted a cold snort when he heard this. He turned around and slowly walked toward the only chair in the hall. The Xiao Yan that you mentioned earlier, is he the Xiao Yan from the Do Chi continent? Those words were spoken very calmly. However, anyone could hear the excitement and agitation hidden within those words. It was as if they were good friends who had been separated from each other for many years and had finally found each other again. A glint flashed across the old flame demon ghost's eyes when he heard this. He nodded slightly and said to the black-robed man. Replying to the hall master, according to the place where that person appeared and how he addressed himself, it should be correct. Before he finished speaking, he continued to speak. Moreover, this subordinate has also sensed an extremely wild and violent flame strength from his body. This also coincides with the attribute characteristic of Xiao Yan. Thus, this Xiao Yan should be the Xiao Yan we're looking for. When the old flame demon ghost spoke until this point, his eyes rotated slightly. He opened his mouth slightly, as though he wanted to say something. However, in the end, he did not say anything. That black-robed person was quiet for a moment when he heard this. He exhaled a deep breath of air and raised his head slightly. Suddenly, a light flashed. The black-robed person rose into the air and stood in midair. At the same time, a wild overbearing aura spread throughout the entire hall in an instant. A voice was also slowly emitted at this moment. Everyone, quickly gather in the main hall. This hall chief has an important announcement. When this voice was emitted, the spirits of everyone in the hall were instantly shaken. Even some of those who had been in a retreat for a long time were forcefully woken up at this moment. Their bodies moved and they stood up one after another. They flew in the direction of the main hall that was mentioned. At the same time, at another place, another person was also reporting the same thing to another person. A group of people stood within a luxurious hall. Their faces revealed curious expressions as they looked at a person in the hall. In the middle of the hall, a green-clothed old man with white hair at his temples was leisurely speaking to an old man in luxurious clothes seated on the main seat. Deacon Yun Mei, that Xiao Yan is indeed a rare genius. Although he is from a poor background, he was able to cultivate to such strength as an unaffiliated cultivator. He is truly extraordinary. Therefore, you believe that we should bring him under our Cloud Celestial sect and use him to strengthen our Cloud Celestial sect so that we can fight against the Ghost Temple sect together? Before Yuan Qing could finish speaking, the old man called Yun Mei, who was seated on the main seat, spoke to continue Yuan Qing's words. Yuan Qing hurriedly nodded his head in agreement when he heard this. Moreover, as if he wanted the old man to nod his head in agreement, Yuan Qing opened his mouth once again to speak. Moreover, I feel that this Xiao Yan may have some enmity with the Ghost Temple sect. This is because he dealt a heavy blow to the old flame demon ghost. Moreover, Yuan Qing paused when he spoke to this point. Only when Yunmei could not help but open her mouth to speak did Yuan Qing raise his head slightly. He looked at Yunmei and continued speaking. Moreover, I feel that the old flame demon ghost and the rest have come to the southwestern region for Shaoyan. Once these words were spoken, everyone in the hall began to talk to each other. They had been guarding the borders of the continent for so many years because they did not know what the Ghost Temple sect was waiting for. Hence, they had always been held back. Yet, Yuan Qing had actually given such a huge answer. They had come to the borders of the continent just to wait for a single person. This answer was simply too weak and powerless. Yunmei also frowned slightly. She looked at Yuan Qing with a meaningful expression, indicating for him to stop talking about this matter. Yuan Qing also understood when he saw this. His eyes turned slightly as he raised his head to look at Yunmei. Originally, he seemed to want to say something. However, in the end, he did not say anything. A long while later, Yuan Qing finally forced a smile and said, "Hee hee. This is only my personal guess. There is no basis for it. Everyone, please do not take it to heart. Just treat it as a joke." Hearing this, everyone cast a glance at Yuan Qing and ignored him. Under Yunmei's lead, everyone in the hall once again regained their calm. Yunmei swept her gaze across the hall, which had calmed down. Her gaze paused on Yuan Qing for a moment before she opened her mouth to speak. "Yuan Qing, according to what you said earlier, this Shaoyan is indeed not bad. It is not impossible for our Cloud Immortal sect to use him. However, I wonder if your intention this time is Shaoyan's wish." Apart from Yuan Qing, everyone else was confused by Yunmei's words. Logically speaking, Yuan Qing should have said this because he had been entrusted by Shaoyan. Why would she ask if it was Shaoyan's wish? Indeed, this was somewhat incomprehensible. Chapter 52. Within the large hall, everyone looked at Yunmei, who was seated in the main seat, with some doubt. They looked at each other and saw the same expression in the eyes of the others. Yuan Qing was also slightly taken aback by Yunmei's words, but he quickly regained his senses. After thinking for a moment in his heart, Yuan Qing finally opened his mouth to speak the truth. Replying Deacon Yunmei, "These words of mine are my own thoughts and not something that Shaoyan asked me to do." Hua. Everyone present was in an uproar when Yuan Qing's words were uttered. All of this was actually Yuan Qing's own thoughts. Yuan Qing had actually spent so much effort to put in a good word for a person he had only met once and wanted to recruit him into the Cloud Celestial sect. This was really hard to understand. At this time, some people could not help but think, could it be that Shaoyan had done something to Yuan Qing? Otherwise, given Yuan Qing's character, why would he be so considerate of others for no reason? Yunmei nodded slightly when she heard this. After which, she quickly asked Yuan Qing. "Since this is the case, I think that there must be a reason behind it, right? Otherwise, why would a dignified elder of the Cloud Celestial sect in the middle region put in so much effort just because of one person's talent?" Yuan Qing smiled awkwardly when he heard this. After which, he opened his mouth and said to Yunmei, "Deacon Yunmei is indeed impressive. Come to think of it, I only want to repay Shaoyan for saving my life. I feel that if I recruit him into my Cloud Celestial sect, not only will I be able to repay the debt, but my Cloud Celestial sect will also have another genius. That is why I did this." "Oh? Saving your life? Didn't he chase away the old flame demon ghost?" Yunmei frowned slightly when she heard this and asked somewhat uncertainly. Yuan Qing nodded slightly and continued to speak to Yunmei. "That's right. Although the old flame demon ghost was chased away by Shaoyan, the final attack of the old flame demon ghost injured my physical body. Deacon Yunmei should also know that people like us, whose strength has yet to reach the Do D class, will definitely die if our physical bodies are damaged if we do not have a fresh physical body or some method to refine a physical body. Back then, there was only me, the old Balrog ghost, Shaoyan, and I at that location. Naturally, there would not be any other living human bodies." As soon as these words were spoken, there was no need for Yuan Qing to explain any further. Everyone was already well aware of the situation. Without a physical body, only some secret techniques that could refine a physical body could save him. Not just anyone could possess such a secret technique. Even in the Yunxian sect, only the upper echelons of the sect possessed such a secret technique. Everyone's eyes brightened when they thought of this. Even Yunmei, who was seated on the main seat, had a faint glow in her eyes. Shaoyan had not only saved Yuan Qing but also possessed a method to refine a physical body. This caused everyone's opinion of Shaoyan to involuntarily change. Shaoyan's talent had already caused everyone to exclaim in admiration. Adding the ability that he possessed, this Shaoyan already possessed the conditions for them to take the initiative to rope him in. Just Xiao Yan's method to refine a physical body was sufficient to defeat most of the people in the hall. After all, even if Yun Mei were to be included, not a single person present had reached the Do D class. In this way, Xiao Yan's secret technique was a great guarantee for the lives of everyone present. Yun Mei frowned slightly as she looked at the chaotic crowd below. An impatient expression was revealed on her old face. She gently lifted her left hand and waved it in front of her. An invisible pressure spread out from Yun Mei's body. The somewhat noisy and lively atmosphere in the hall instantly became quiet. Yun Mei frowned and swept her gaze over everyone present. Finally, she let out a cold snort and looked at Yuan Qing. Yun Mei looked at Yuan Qing and nodded. Her eyes revealed a look of admiration. She smiled slightly and opened her mouth to speak in a candid manner. It is very good that you are so grateful. My Cloud Celestial sect needs people like you. Only such an upright person can allow my Cloud Celestial sect to grow stronger. Ha 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 ha. Before anyone could react, Yun Mei's expression turned serious. She quickly opened her mouth to ask Yuan Qing. However, since all of this is decided by you alone, I think that Xiao Yan may not agree to join my Cloud Celestial sect, right? Everyone's expression was slightly stunned when they heard this. Immediately, they looked at Yuan Qing with some worry in their hearts. Yuan Qing was also stunned by Yun Mei's words. This was something that he had never expected. Indeed, this was only his own idea. He had thought this way because he wanted to rope in Xiao Yan. Moreover, it was not the kind of roping that everyone present had in mind. Through Xiao Yan's various actions and Xiao Yan's final confirmation, Yuan Qing had already decided. This Xiao Yan must be a disciple of a hidden great faction. Moreover, his identity was definitely not ordinary. This could be seen from how the old flame demon ghost had involuntarily cried out when he heard his name. The old flame demon ghost knew about Xiao Yan. It was very likely that his goal was to capture Xiao Yan and use him to threaten the faction behind him. Xiao Yan had asked Yuan Qing to reveal his identity as an independent cultivator. Yuan Qing had agreed to Xiao Yan's request without hesitation. In Yuan Qing's opinion, Xiao Yan's actions were entirely to prevent his identity from being exposed and bring disaster to himself. Therefore, Yuan Qing wanted to make use of this point to let Xiao Yan join the Yunxian sect. On one hand, he could conceal his identity. On the other hand, he could secretly pull in a powerful faction for the Yunxian sect. This would be a great contribution to the Yunxian sect. If he could recruit Xiao Yan into the Yunxian sect, as long as he could establish a good relationship with him, the overall strength of the Yunxian sect would be greatly improved in a short period of time. Unfortunately, if Yuan Qing knew about Xiao Yan's true background, he would not think this way. Yuan Qing frowned and thought for a long time. Finally, he took a deep breath. His eyes suddenly became determined as he said, Deacon Yun Mei, I will definitely persuade Xiao Yan to join the Yunxian sect and help our sect recruit a genius. Yun Mei raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard this. She looked at Yuan Qing's determined expression and lowered her eyelids slightly. Her eyes moved, but she did not say anything. He then raised his head to look at Yuan Qing and nodded with a smile before saying, It's fine. It's good that you have such intentions. Since it's for the sake of our Cloud Immortal sect, I wish you success in recruiting him to our Cloud Immortal sect. Before she finished speaking, Yun Mei's expression turned serious and she immediately opened her mouth to speak. Remember, regardless of whether he agrees to join the Celestial Cloud sect or not, you must maintain a good relationship with him. Since he is a genius, do not provoke him easily. At the very least, you must maintain a good relationship with him. Do not make enemies for the Celestial Cloud sect. Otherwise, you will have to deal with him yourself. Yuan Qing hurriedly nodded in response. However, Yun Mei's eyes lit up as she looked at Yuan Qing. She smiled and said, Don't worry. Haha, your luck is pretty good. It's a blessing in disguise. I see that the Do Qi in your body has reached a bottleneck. I presume you're about to break through? Without waiting for Yuan Qing to speak, Yun Mei continued. In that case, I have a pill here. Take it. As soon as Yuan Qing finished speaking, Yun Mei waved her sleeve and a ray of light shot out and was caught by Yuan Qing. After Yuan Qing expressed his gratitude, he dismissed everyone in the hall. Yun Mei sat alone on the main seat. She raised her head to look at the sky outside the hall and muttered to herself. Could it be as Yuan Qing said? That the person they are looking for this time is Xiao Yan? However, why is it so different from before? What on earth are these people who are neither human nor ghost doing? Chapter 53. Humph. A bunch of stubborn, despicable old men. How dare they delay my return by a month? How infuriating. Humph. If I don't wait for a year or so before I return, I will write my name backwards. On the street, a sloppy old man in ordinary clothes was walking on his own. He did not care about the disgusted looks on the passers-by's faces. As he walked, he cursed under his breath, causing a few passers-by to feel annoyed. Even if he was not cursing the passers-by on the street, it would be easy to cause a misunderstanding. If it was not for the fact that someone saw the jade pendant hanging on his waist, it would have caused a commotion. There were a few people who didn't notice the jade token, but they noticed the jade token after being reminded by others. Immediately, their expressions changed drastically. After thanking the person who reminded them, they quickly left the place resentfully. This was because they saw the identity of the most powerful force in the area on the jade pendant. There was only one word on it, Shao. The overlord of the area was the Shao clan. In Shao City, no one dared to offend the people from the Shao clan. The old man seemed to have realized that something was wrong with him. He frowned slightly and lowered his sleeves to cover the jade pendant. Then, he lifted it up again. However, unlike before, the jade pendant that represented the entire Shao clan had disappeared. On the other hand, the old man revealed a smile and left the city in a leisurely manner. Shao City. Swoosh. Along with the sound of wind breaking, a man in white appeared on the peak of a mountain. The wind and waves attacked, causing Xiao Yan's robes to flutter and his hair to dance wildly. Xiao Yan took a deep breath of the cool air and felt the wind around him. His lips curled into a smile. With a move, he disappeared from the peak of the mountain with a gust of wind. In the next instant, a gust of wind swept across the forest in the distance. The trees within a radius of a few hundred feet swayed and rustled. Xiao Yan's figure appeared at the top of a tree. Hearing the rustling sound beside his ear, Xiao Yan swept his gaze over the leaves that filled the sky. His body once again flashed and disappeared. Xiao Yan's figure kept flashing and disappearing. In the clear and spacious area, the wind was howling. The sound of the wind was continuous and it swept across the area. Humph! Suddenly, Xiao Yan let out a roar. He stood in the air and opened his arms. A suction force appeared in his hands. A strong gust of wind blew between the heavens and the earth, sweeping away the clouds. Dark clouds surged, and the sky instantly turned dark. Xiao Yan moved his feet and took a mysterious step. The suction force in his hands increased. With a move, he disappeared from the spot with a gust of wind. The gust of wind seemed to have received an order and it swept across the area. The wind stirred, and the sound of the wind and cranes shrieked between heaven and earth. It was like a mad dragon roaring, and its might shook the heavens. The invisible gust of wind swept up the leaves in the forest and formed a long green dragon that swam across the sky. The long dragon lingered in the sky. Its head was raised high. Although it was formed by wind and clouds, it still gave off a domineering feeling. However, a white-clothed figure suddenly appeared on the dragon's head when the long dragon lingered in the sky and raised its head. His hands were behind his back and there was a faint smile on his face. Xiao Yan waved his sleeves. The huge fellow under his feet, which was like a real dragon, suddenly turned into fallen leaves that filled the sky and drifted down with this wave. At this moment, an aged voice that was accompanied by a slight smile suddenly sounded out, and it said, "That's right. Haha, not bad. You actually borrowed the power of the wind and combined it with your footwork. You have successfully executed the wind step of the sky extinction steps on your first try. You can be considered to have practiced it quite well." Xiao Yan rejoiced and smiled upon hearing Gu Yu's words. He thanked Gu Yu. He thanked Gu Yu and said, "This is all thanks to old Gu's guidance. He allowed me to use the thunderbolt power of the 3000 lightning movement and the wind power of the sky extinction steps to cultivate the wind step of the sky extinction steps. That is why my cultivation speed is so fast." Gu Yu laughed when he heard this and continued, using the sky extinction steps to cultivate the sky extinction steps. Using the requirements of the second level, the Lingyun Great Realm, to cultivate the first level. Such a method is naturally incomparably fast. You think that you are cultivating the first level, but if I were to go into detail, you are actually cultivating the second level, the Lingyun Great Realm. Think about it. You have already cultivated the Lingyun Great Realm. In that case, wouldn't the wind extinction step be a piece of cake? Xiao Yan also nodded his head in admiration. He then opened his mouth and said. If I persist in using this method to cultivate the sky extinction steps, I believe that I will be able to achieve initial success in the first step, the wind extinction step, in less than 2 months. After saying that, he stopped cultivating and casually found a place to rest. Gu Yu also smiled in admiration but did not say anything. The path of cultivation was about progressing step by step. Blindly cultivating would only cause one to be overly eager for quick success and ultimately fail on the verge of success. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. This was the principle. Xiao Yan sat on the peak of a mountain. The flame art cultivation method in his body was slowly circulating as he absorbed the natural energy between heaven and earth. Suddenly, Xiao Yan seemed to have thought of something and withdrew from his cultivation state. With a flip of his hand, a jade bottle appeared in Xiao Yan's hand. At the same time, Xiao Yan shouted in his heart, "Old Gu, I have something to ask you. Elder Gu, I have something to ask of you. Please come out and meet me." His voice had just sounded when a beam of light shot out from the fire seal between Xiao Yan's eyebrows. It continuously transformed in front of Xiao Yan and finally turned into the appearance of an old man. It was Gu Yu. Gu Yu raised his eyebrows when he saw Xiao Yan's anxious expression. He did not ask any further and sat down on the ground, waiting for Xiao Yan to speak. Xiao Yan saw Gu Yu sit on the ground and extended his hands. He placed a jade bottle in front of Gu Yu. Gu Yu frowned when he saw this. He glanced at Xiao Yan. When he saw Xiao Yan nod his head, Gu Yu frowned and received the jade bottle in his hand. Gu Yu looked at the jade bottle in his palm but did not see anything special about it. He did not think too much about it. Xiao Yan's objective should be in this jade bottle. Gu Yu slowly opened the jade bottle in front of Xiao Yan's somewhat surprised gaze. A thumb-sized milky white ball of light slowly floated out of the jade bottle. Gu Yu raised his eyebrows when he saw this. A surprised expression appeared on his face. Gu Yu extended his hand and light appeared in his hand, wrapping around the ball of light. After which, he looked at Xiao Yan and slowly opened his mouth. Who is this person? He is actually still alive. Chapter 54. At this moment, Gu Yu's face was filled with shock. His pupils shrunk, and his mouth was half open. He looked at the milky white light cluster floating above his palm and was unable to recover for a long time. Xiao Yan was also dumbfounded. Gu Yu was an elder. A senior was indeed a senior. Although this wisp of soul fragment was extremely weak, Gu Yu was still able to guess what was going on. Based on this alone, Xiao Yan believed that he might be able to find the method he had been searching for a long time from Gu Yu. A moment later, Gu Yu slowly withdrew the light cluster in his palm and placed it back into the jade bottle. Then, he handed it back to Xiao Yan. Gu Yu stood up and turned his body sideways. He frowned and sighed deeply. After which, he turned his head to look at Xiao Yan. Gu Yu slowly opened his mouth and looked at Xiao Yan. If I have not guessed wrongly, you want me to help you repair his soul, right? Xiao Yan was not surprised when he heard this. Since Gu Yu had already seen this wisp of remnant spirit, he should be able to guess what Xiao Yan's purpose was. Hence, Xiao Yan slowly nodded. His expression was a little surprised as he admitted to this point. Gu Yu nodded when he saw this. After which, he lifted his head to look at the sky. This caused Xiao Yan's heart to tighten slightly. He became a little worried. A long while later, Gu Yu finally opened his mouth and asked Xiao Yan. What does this person have to do with you? Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows when he heard this. He felt a little surprised in his heart. He pondered for a moment in his heart before he opened his mouth to speak. He is my ancestor. In order to help me break through to the D state, he ignited his spiritual strength. In the end, he allowed me to raise my strength. Hence. Before Xiao Yan could finish speaking, Gu Yu interrupted Xiao Yan. Hence, you want to save him to repay him for his help. Am I right? Xiao Yan lowered his eyelids and nodded when he heard this. He did not speak. Gu Yu frowned and didn't say anything for a long time. A long while later, he shook his head and rolled his eyes at Xiao Yan. His expression was somewhat reproachful as he slowly opened his mouth and said, What a worrisome little fellow. Once you call this old man out, you ask such a difficult question. You really don't know how to respect your elders. Xiao Yan suddenly stood up. A joyous expression was revealed on his face. He did not refute Gu Yu's teasing. However, his eyes were red as he stared at Gu Yu. He was panting heavily as if he was an old bachelor who had suddenly seen a beautiful woman. Gu Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It took a while before Xiao Yan slowly regained his composure. However, one could still see the excitement in his heart. Gu Yu watched as Xiao Yan slowly regained his composure and smiled helplessly. He stretched out his hand and gestured for Xiao Yan to calm down first. Then, he sighed and slowly said, That's right. This ancestor of yours does indeed still have a trace of life aura left in him. Gu Yu paused when he spoke. However, Xiao Yan's eyes brightened. This was something that he had not detected. Xiao Yan had never detected even the slightest trace of life aura before. Before Xiao Yan could speak, Gu Yu inhaled a deep breath and quickly said, "It's too early for you to celebrate. Don't be happy too early. It's still unknown whether or not your ancestor will be able to be resurrected. This is because his wisp of soul remnant is too weak. It is also because of this that there are no natural treasures that can nourish his soul. Therefore, you should not have too much hope. The only method that I can provide you is to use your own ability to protect him as much as possible." Xiao Yan's expression, which was originally filled with hope, appeared a little downcast at this moment. Xiao Shen was far too important to him and the entire Xiao clan. If it were not for Xiao Shen, Xiao Yan might not have been able to become an emperor. If it were not for Xiao Shen, the Xiao clan would have likely ceased to exist and would not have been able to prosper. Although Xiao Shen was a figure from 1,000 years ago, he had still fought for too much for the Xiao clan even after 1,000 years. However, Xiao Yan had bitterly searched for a revival method for 10 years. The hope in Xiao Yan's heart had been completely shattered by Gu Yu's words. Gu Yu frowned when he saw the downcast expression on Xiao Yan's face. He lowered his head and began to ponder. Time slowly flowed by in this silent atmosphere. Following the silence of the Xiao Yan duo, the area within 1,000 feet of Xiao Yan had become deathly silent. Everything appeared incomparably quiet. Even some magical beasts were quietly crawling on the ground. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. Their hearts were filled with fear. Finally, the sky gradually darkened. It was already evening. A day had quietly passed. Gu Yu, who had been quietly standing on the mountain peak, finally moved at this moment. His body trembled slightly. He slowly lifted his lowered head and looked at Xiao Yan, who still had a downcast expression. In the next moment, this silence, which had lasted for an entire day, was finally broken by Gu Yu. Gu Yu's eyes brightened. He looked at Xiao Yan's listless appearance and clapped his hands heavily. An expression of understanding appeared on his elderly face. This action of Gu Yu also woke up Xiao Yan, who had been in a downcast mood for the entire day. He looked at Gu Yu with a listless face. Only when Xiao Yan saw the expression on Gu Yu's face did his expression change. He was suddenly startled. Both of his eyes quickly reddened. His face was filled with wild joy and surprise. His seated body stood up from the ground. For some unknown reason, Xiao Yan's legs felt numb when he stood up, even though he had the physical body of a half-emperor. His body staggered for a moment before he managed to stabilize himself. Xiao Yan's body shook. The numbness in his legs disappeared. After which, his eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at Gu Yu. It was a long while later before Xiao Yan swallowed a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty. This caused his dry throat to recover a little. His lips trembled as he asked Gu Yu, one word at a time. Old Gu, have you thought of my ancestor's resurrection method? Gu Yu gently nodded upon hearing this and acknowledged the request. Then, Gu Yu spoke again. This wisp of your ancestor's soul is simply too weak. The slightest carelessness could cause it to completely dissipate. I have thought of many methods in the past. I have considered hundreds of natural treasures that can help one's soul origin. Unfortunately, none of them are feasible. Although Gu Yu's methods had all failed, Xiao Yan calmed down. He was not anxious at all. Since Gu Yu had spoken, why would he lie to him? As expected, Gu Yu looked at Xiao Yan's calm expression and nodded. He continued to speak. He continued, until just now, I thought of a method. Moreover, if this method doesn't work, there will be no hope of resurrecting your ancestor. This method is to use something as weak as your ancestor's soul fragment to nourish, merge, and recover. As for this sort of thing, it is the pure soul origin energy. Chapter 55. Soul origin? Xiao Yan's face was uncertain as he looked at Gu Yu and asked in disbelief. That's right. It is soul origin. Moreover, it must be pure enough. Otherwise, if the soul origin is not pure enough and conflicts with your ancestor's remnant spirit when it merges, I believe you know what the final outcome will be. Xiao Yan frowned when he heard Gu Yu's words. The essence of one's soul was the foundation of a person. Extracting the essence of another person's soul was equivalent to Xiao Yan killing someone. However, such an action was not something that Xiao Yan could do. Although Xiao Yan did not dare to call himself a good person, he would not kill someone for no reason. This was not Xiao Yan's way of doing things. Even if all of this was to revive his ancestor, Xiao Yan would not do such a thing. However, if he did not do so, Xiao Yan would not be able to be revived. This made Xiao Yan hesitate. Moreover, there was another crucial point. Soul origin was a person's foundation. It was the foundation of life. How was it possible to completely purify it? Xiao Yan could not help but frown when he thought about these major problems. Gu Yu seemed to have seen through Xiao Yan's thoughts when he saw this. He laughed out loud and said, "You don't have to do such a thing. Why don't you just kill those who want to kill you? This way, it will be in line with your heart and you will be able to get rid of your enemies. Isn't that great? As for what you are thinking about not being able to completely purify soul origin, ha 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 ha. That's just unnecessary worry. It's only been 10 years. Have you already forgotten your identity? Ha 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 ha. Flame Emperor. You are really a Flame Emperor. I can't believe you have forgotten your identity. A heavenly flame is a divine object that can incinerate all living things. What does that little bit of spiritual origin source count for? Moreover, you also possess the fallen heart flame, which has the greatest destructive power towards spiritual strength, and the purifying demonic lotus flame, which has the greatest purifying power. If you want to obtain a pure spiritual origin source, it is still a matter of your strength. Xiao Yan finally reacted after Gu Yu's words left his mouth. Who said that there was no spiritual essence? Xiao Yan's great enemy, the Hun clan, had so many people. All of them were the spiritual essence that Xiao Yan was searching for. Xiao Yan smiled comfortably when he thought of this in his heart. After which, he calmed his heart. After exchanging a few words with Gu Yu, Zhou Yuan entered a state of cultivation. Seeing Xiao Yan enter a state of cultivation, Gu Yu stood to the side, stared at the jade bottle in Xiao Yan's arms, frowning, muttering to himself. Speaking of which, how did Xiao Yan's ancestor survive in the Genesis Chi? Moreover, he's using the Universe Genesis Chi to recover. Why is that? It was a long while later before Gu Yu seemed to have recalled something. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the jade bottle in Xiao Yan's arms. His mouth muttered to himself. He muttered to himself, could it be that the cultivation method that Xiao Yan's ancestor practiced is that? That cultivation method has long disappeared from the continent. I didn't expect it. I really didn't expect it. Time flashed by. In the blink of an eye, it was already late at night. Xiao Yan, who was in the midst of training, suddenly opened his originally shut eyes. Xiao Yan waved his sleeve, and a stream of black light shot out. The black light began to transform a short distance in front of Xiao Yan. Finally, it transformed into a completely black human figure. If one were to carefully observe it, the seemingly black skin was actually an empty space. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Yan. The time has come. Isn't it time for you to fulfill your promise to me? Hearing this, Xiao Yan frowned slightly and opened his mouth to ask. Hey Yan, do you really want to become emperor that badly? Hey Yan let out a cold laugh when he heard this. Enough. It's not up to you to judge what I want. You just need to keep your promise. Xiao Yan also sighed when he heard this. He helplessly nodded his head and said faintly. He said indifferently, since that's the case, are you ready? Humph. Humph. I've been waiting for this day for 1,000 years. I've long been ready. Why do I need to make unnecessary preparations? Xiao Yan nodded. Since that's the case, I'll help you. Before his voice faded, Xiao Yan's figure flashed and appeared high in the sky. Xiao Yan sat cross-legged in the air and shouted to He Yan below. Hey Yan. I see that your body is overflowing with battle chi. You only need to use Genesis Chi to complete the last step of your breakthrough. I will do my best to absorb the energy between heaven and earth, while you only need to absorb Genesis Chi. As long as there is enough Genesis Chi, I believe that you will be able to break through to Emperor in less than 10 days. He Yan's eyes brightened slightly. Just as he was about to speak, another voice sounded. Xiao Yan, I suggest that you give him your jade bottle before you help him. If it's not bad, it should be of great use. Xiao Yan's eyebrows twitched when these words were uttered. Although he did not understand, he still gently nodded his head. He Yan's expression turned to one of shock. His entire body abruptly shook as he involuntarily took a few steps back. He looked to the side and saw an old man looking at him with a smile on his face. He Yan's expression changed. His figure moved and arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan smiled faintly. This is old Gu. You don't have to worry, he won't touch you. He Yan carefully looked at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan extended his hand, and a jade bottle was placed in Xiao Yan's arms. At the same time, he said, this is related to my ancestor. This is related to my ancestor. Be careful, don't break it. Otherwise, you've also felt how terrifying Elder Gu is. Xiao Yan did not say anything else. His body straightened as he entered a state of crazy cultivation. He Yan once again glanced at Gu Yu below. He completely ignored Xiao Yan's earlier words. His eyes rotated rapidly, and he found a place with dense Genesis Chi. After which, he threw himself into training. Gu Yu smiled faintly as he looked at the jade bottle in He Yan's arms. As soon as the two of them entered a state of cultivation, the sky suddenly became stormy and turbulent. Thunderclouds churned in the sky as lightning and thunder rumbled. The originally dusky world became as bright as day. At times, it was night, but at other times, it was day. The cycle of day and night continued for several hours, while He Yan's breakthrough was still in the process of slowly progressing. 10 days later. Xiao Yan beckoned with his hand, and a suction force was emitted from his hand. A jade bottle rose into the air and was kept in Xiao Yan's storage ring. At this moment, Gu Yu's eyes finally regained some clarity. In the sky. Roar. He Yan let out a furious roar. On the surface of his body, black flames rose up, and flames burst out from his eyes. The space around He Yan continuously shattered as he devoured the spatial power. The entire world was gradually absorbed into his body, becoming a part of him. Boom. A bolt of black lightning suddenly filled the sky and slammed into He Yan's body with a loud bang. After a loud boom, there was no one else apart from Xiao Yan and Gu Yu. Xiao Yan frowned slightly. Before he could do anything, another bolt of black lightning struck down from the sky. Boom. He Yan looked at the black lightning and let out a furious roar. His hand seals changed rapidly and numerous complicated seals were shot out one after another. Gu Yu's expression changed when he saw the seals, but he did not say anything in the end. Gu Yu's hand moved gently under his sleeve, and a ray of light shot out. It flickered a short distance in front of Xiao Yan before disappearing. In Xiao Yan's eyes, everything in the sky was normal. He Yan would be able to make a breakthrough as long as he could endure a little longer. However, He Yan's aura was weak in Gu Yu's eyes, and the flames all over his body were dim. At this moment, a blue barrier appeared in the sky above the 9 heavens. The barrier continued to change. Finally, a huge palm was slowly formed. The huge palm slammed down on He Yan. He Yan would definitely die if he was hit. At this moment, a black light flashed, and everything in the sky returned to normal. It was as though nothing had happened. However, He Yan was nowhere to be found. At the same time, in a secret room thousands of miles away, the originally narrowed eyes of a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes were slowly opened at this moment. He looked in a certain direction. That direction was the direction where Xiao Yan was located. At the same time, in another place, a pair of eyes filled with blood was also looking over there. Although the two of them were not together, at this moment, they spoke at the same time and doubtfully asked, "What's the matter? Who is it? Who dares to touch the sky boundary?"